loyalty described as, do you care? And I care, and that's why I'm on this show. Comes a time, here we go.
I'm a sucker for Oteil, man. I saw that same feeling that I have, that would he filled a void that I didn't even know existed.
It feels so good to, as Ben said, to try to do something about an issue as opposed to complaining.
If you can't help, don't hurt.
If we could just all get out there and throw cream puffs at each other, maybe things, instead of bullets and angry words, it would be better.
When you stop laughing, you stop living.
There's a worldwide surge in interest in mushrooms.
It was deep, man.
It's not that TM makes your mind quiet down there. It already is. We're just stuck up here. We've lost access.
And Jumpin' Jack Flash came out by the Stones. So I thought, all right, perfect, man. I'm gonna drive. And I started driving through the neighborhood, and I got a text from Mick Jagger.
People saying that, you know, what we do is non-essential. Well, playing those few gigs that you saw me at felt pretty essential to me.
It wasn't like they were clapping from here. It was they were clapping from here.
My view of things is that death is the last and best reward for a life well lived.
Like it's the strangest of places if you look at it right, you know?
If you're liking what you're hearing, head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get your bus pass for an extra episode every week.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Comes a Time. That's Oteil.
And that's Mike. Dude, how psyched are you for Dick's, Colorado?
Stoked. Going Colorado tomorrow to see Fish, and then Friday, Saturday doing shows in Fort Collins, and then going to Rocky Mountain National Park, hanging with my little bro and my nephew. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, very, very excited. Good way to, we're in September already, dude. It's great. I texted you the other day. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, it's September. It's summertime, came and went. Wow.
There's something that my old buddy Jeep told me about the passage of time. Like, you know, when you're 2, a year is half your life. When you're 50, a year's of. So it's like the roll of toilet paper. You know? So it only gets worse, man. That's all I could say. I look at Nigel and I'm like, he's like, Dad, put me up on your shoulders. I'm like, Jesus, you're too big for this now. Ow. It's just like, wow, it's so fast, man. But it's good.
Speaking of the
smiling,
passage,
you know?
Speaking of the passage of time, we had our guest today captured many of the most important moments in our scene. We had the one and only, the omnipotent Jay Blakesberg on the podcast.
Yeah.
The best. He's the best.
Yeah. He's got a museum exhibit with a museum that's actually part of the Smithsonian. Yeah. So from, like he said, I went from the stoner, you know, losers / least likely to, most likely to not succeed in school, you know, to, well, he did a short thing in prison, but then he triumphs.
Yeah, hey, we all trip up. Yeah.
No, but this is so great. Like, to the Smithsonian, that's cool. And wow, how many great stories. I don't think we can even, we might have to cut this into a couple episodes.
Man. I mean, in all honesty, you could just tell just by having him on from the get-go, he's a professional. He's just a professional at everything he does. And he was a professional. He interviewed himself, basically. I mean, it was awesome.
It's not his first rodeo. Yeah, he makes it real easy for us, and it's cool to just like get into tangents. And
I didn't even get to ask him. I would have loved to have known what it was like to work on this project with his daughter. You know, like just working together, and like I'm so fascinated by parent-child projects. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I really like Graham and Phil playing together fascinates me. I
try not to put that pressure on my kids, but you can't help, like, you know, and I don't put that pressure on them, but you can't help but hope, like, but you know, however it shakes out, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And his daughter, he trusted her because she was like, I want this book to reach not like just your age level people. I want it to reach my age level. And so she was like, what did he say? It was like 4 photos I had to really fight for. She was like, no. So, but that's so cool to like give her the reins and be like, you drive the car and it's my life.
Yeah.
It's that hunk of my, all the film, it's only film. It's no digital.
Well, and that's an incredible gift to give his daughter, like that trust and faith and stuff. And she obviously knocked it out of the park. If you follow Retro Blakesberg, she's killing it. Yeah. What a cool project and what a cool guy and cool dad and all that. So Jay,
he got her to curate the museum too, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he say that?
I believe. Well, yeah, I think so. Exhibit. I think so.
Well, that's cool.
So now she's a Smithsonian curator at 25, 6, whatever. So killing it. But thank you, Jay. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We're here on Osiris, home to great podcasts at osirispod.com. You can check those out. And if you want more of us, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod for a bonus episode every week. And at the end of this podcast, you can hear all of the places that you can find all of Jay's work. So please check it out. I believe Blakesberg.com. 10th book. Did he say 10th book or 6th? I think he said 10th. I was blown away. I think it was 10th book or 16th.
Something that happens when 30 years goes by.
Taking a snap. Yeah, way to go. Stay safe, everybody. Take care of each other, and we'll see you on the flip.
Live long
Peace.
And prosper. On the Road with Jay Blakesberg. That'll be the name of the episode.
Now that's a podcast I'd listen to.
Yeah. I'm on the road, man. I just got back to New York from Sacred Rose Festival in Chicago. It was super fun, except for the last day we got canceled early evening because of lightning. So J-Rad never got to play. Circles Around the Sun never got to play.
Damn.
So it's a tough ending in that regard, but otherwise it was a great festival. Phil did the Philco thing, which was Phil Lesh with Jeff Tweedy and Nels Klein from Wilco, and Carl Denson on sax and vocals, Graham, Elliott, Bolo, Stu Allen. It was a pretty spectacular little combination there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I'm a Wilco freak, and I actually saw them the next night in New Haven, and I love Jeff Tweedy. I mean, Nels is just, guitar freaks, people who love guitar, if you don't know Nels Klein, please look him up. He's just one of the most virtuistic, whatever.
So do you know the song Via Chicago?
Oh, right? Yeah.
So they played 2 Wilco songs. Via Chicago is one of them. And it's sort of like a slow paced, ballady kind of a song, and then like out of nowhere Nels Klein takes, I think, like a chopstick or something out of his back pocket, and he does this like crazy like feedback intense like a Viola Lee blues distortion for 15 or 20 seconds, and then just stops dead, and it goes back to this like very mellow right, and he's doing that, and Phil just looks over at him and just like raises his eyebrows and just goes, whoa. It was a moment, that was really a really great moment. But yeah, that was a really spectacular combination that the festival put together with a woman named Molly who works for Phil. I think that the two of them, Michael Berg, who founded the festival with this woman Molly who works for Phil, and I think they worked their magic to make this Wilco thing happen, and it did not disappoint.
Nice. Yeah. Oh man, Tweedy. I think when it's all said and done, I mean, Tweedy goes down as like one of the great American singer-songwriters. And
absolutely,
he's got that Garcia-esque creaky, weathered voice that's just so unique, and it's not singing; it's talking harmonically, it's talking melodically from your heart. And God, I love him so much, and I was so happy to see that lineup and to hear him do. They opened up with Dire Wolf too. Yeah. To hear him sing Dire Wolf was just perfect song choice.
Yeah, it was really was a great set for sure. And Commenti on keyboards. That's who I forgot to say. So Jeff played keys, which was great.
Nice. Super nice.
So how's New York treating you so far?
New York is good. I've got a little house here at the beach, so I just came to sort of help close it up a little bit for the winter before I head back to San Francisco. I'm not sure when this will get broadcast, but I got to get back to San Francisco because I got a couple of things coming up pretty quickly here. There's another festival in Buffalo in about 3 weeks called Borderland that I'll be at. So that's like the second or third weekend. I think it's technically the third weekend in September. Flaming Lips, Michael Franti, Portugal the Man. There's this new great band from Jersey that's up and coming called Dogs in a Pile. Now you would think Dogs in a Pile is a Grateful Dead cover band or tribute band because of the lyric, right?
He's gone,
But they're like these young 20, 21-year-old kids that are just crushing it. Keep your eyes open for Dogs in a Pile. So that's going to be a fun one at Borderlands. Nice. The other big things for me, which is why I reached out to you guys to hopefully get on your podcast, was to talk about my new book and my new museum exhibition that I have coming up.
Come on.
So if I may, I'll just jump right in if you're okay. And then we can go from there. But so early in the pandemic, like month one in the pandemic, my daughter, Ricky, came to me and said, the last thing that I saw, Oteil, before the shutdown was you. Right, we were at
MSG.
We were at the brothers at MSG, and so Friday the 13th, I flew home with my two kids, and they thought they were coming back for 2 weeks. So they brought like a little bit of clothes, right? And we all know how that turned out. So a month in, my daughter said, "Hey, I want to start a new Instagram page for you. I have my J. Blakesberg Instagram that I post everything from stuff I shot when I was a kid to the Dead to what I shoot yesterday of Oteil or whoever, Philco, Dead & Co, Bobby, whatever." And she said, "I want to do an Instagram page that's called Retro Blakesberg, and only what will be on it is photographs that you shot on film." And so that is basically like 1978 to 2008 when I stopped shooting film. And I said,
love that one, man.
Yeah, and I said,
awesome.
I said, go for it. And she built this. She built this Instagram page from scratch, and it's got, I think, about 20,000 followers. And one of the things that she also wanted to do was sort of try and reach an audience that is not just my audience, right? Not just a bunch of Deadheads and Allman Brothers fans and jam band fans. Because in the late 80s and early 90s, I was shooting the beginning of Soundgarden, the Chili Peppers, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, alternative rock, right? So at the beginning of my career, nobody cared about the Grateful Dead. I still shot everything I could in the late 80s, but all the magazines, which is where we made our money and our bread and butter, and all those magazines don't exist anymore except for Rolling Stone and a handful of others, was shooting, they were interested in what Soundgarden was doing. So for instance, in 92, I did this backstage photograph of all of Pearl Jam and all of Soundgarden at Lollapalooza. And it's, now 30 years later, it's a legendary epic photograph, right? At the time, it was just these two up and coming bands, right? Yeah. And so, history has been written. And so Ricky basically did this Instagram, and I was working on a book called Psychedelic Icons and Other Outlaws or something like that. And the woman who was writing all the text for that book got long COVID, and she couldn't finish writing the text, and she couldn't work. She was in bed basically for 8 months or a year, couldn't even walk around the block, 40-year-old healthy woman. Right.
Jesus.
And, so we couldn't hit our deadlines on that book. And so Ricky and I had been talking about turning the Retro Blakesberg Instagram page into a coffee table book. And I just turned to Ricky one day and said, "Okay, here we go. The switch is flipped. We're on. Let's do it." And we just went full steam ahead. And Ricky curated the book 100%. I think there were 2 or 3 photos in the whole book that I fought for that I wanted to be in. But essentially, this is from the eye of a 26-year-old woman who has a great eye for photography, studied photography in school, is in grad school studying art management and administration and archival studies right now. And so she had very, very strong opinions. And I like to call this book my visual autobiography. So it's called Retro Blakesberg, The Film Archives, Volume 1. And it's separated into decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And at the beginning of each decade, I wrote a 2,500 word essay talking about where I was at that time, what I was doing, either as a human or a photographer. And so you sort of trace my evolution as a photographer, which started in high school in the late 1970s, shooting a bunch of kids, smoking a bunch of weed and drinking a bunch of beer and taking psychedelics and looking like it, to, you know, the more fucked up you were, the more chance you had for me to take your photo. Right. And so, you know, all of those photos are in there. And then I roll into college. I'm sure you guys know that there was a short prison stint in there for possession of LSD. So high school, dead tour, short prison stay, college. And then I moved to the Bay Area and start my career in 85, 86. So that's sort of the trajectory. And we hit all of those sections in this book. So, you know, that's how the book came about, and that's where it is. And, you know, again, there's pictures, there's pictures of portraits that I did of the Chili Peppers in both 87 and 89. So 87, 35 years ago. If you were at that Chili Pepper show in Seattle in 87, right, and you were 22 to 25 years old, you're 60 years old now, right?
Unbelievable.
You know, you're 58, right? And so, you know, so it's not just deadheads looking back at these photos from 20, 30, 40 years ago now. It's fans of, you know, like I saw Jane's Addiction in a small nightclub on Haight Street. I saw the Chili Peppers in small venues, Soundgarden in small venues. You know, it was the beginning of the alternative rock thing. And so now that audience is a very mature audience, right? And you see it, Oteil, when you go wherever you play. No matter how young the band members are in your band or how old, the demographic goes from, you know, 20 to 70, right?
Yeah. It's really weird too to look at bands, to see guys interviewed from, like, you know, Nirvana or whatever, you know, and you see how old they are now. You're like, oh my goodness. It's like, look at Flea, you know, we got old. It's a lot of time. Time went so fast, man.
We got older. We didn't get old. We got older.
That's true. We got older. But we got a lot older real quick.
Yeah.
I remember Green Day being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm like, how? I thought you needed to be a band for a certain amount of time in order to, and then I did the math, and I'm like, oh shit, yeah. Like, they've been around long enough to.
25 years as Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I know. And it's like, wow. To me, that was almost still like new music, because it's like anything that came out.
My only vision of them is, I was just watching a thing on, what's his name? Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He has a professional wrestling thing. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, God, you know, nothing against him. I was like, look how old we are, you know, just like, whoa. I only have this image of him as like super, Smashing Pumpkins. You're like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first couple times I shot the Smashing Pumpkins, he had hair. He had a full head of hair.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was in Chicago for Sacred Rose this last weekend, on the Thursday before Sacred Rose started, I had lunch at Billy Corgan's vegan restaurant up in Highland Park, north of Chicago. I was up there visiting a photographer friend of mine. He said, let's go to Billy Corgan's restaurant. You know,
that's great.
And I was like, yeah, it was delicious. So
he's a cool dude. Like, but I was thinking about that passage of time. Like, that was quick.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's incredible is, as a music fan, no matter what, the visual aspect of it, some of my favorite books are, you know, like The Art of the Fillmore, and some of the pictures from like those days, and, you know, thumbing through Geraldine Brandelius's like Dead Family album, or, you know, like any book, Keith Moon's biography, you go right to that middle part where all the pictures are, you know,
always.
You always go to the pictures first. So this is so exciting that you have this and all those different genres. I just finished Flea's book, Acid for the Children. So
I read that too. It's a good one. Yeah.
God, it's so good. But like,
and what's interesting is that he's like the same age as me. And so he was coming up in LA doing that whole punk rock thing and figuring how to be in a band and figuring out his whole thing with Anthony. And I was being a Deadhead and following the Grateful Dead, but we're essentially the same age. And I even have a picture of Flea and Bob. We were together at a benefit in San Francisco from a couple years ago. So
nice.
The worlds merged, collided.
So I met him one time at a NAMM show. We actually played together, I think, because we were both playing Modulus basses. and he had a signature model. So we actually got to jam for a little bit at their booth at the NAMM show. He was really cool. Yeah. He was really cool.
His first guitar player, Hillel, taught him how to play the bass, and he was like, just walk your fingers. That was really interesting to hear, Jay, in the book about how Flea learned he started out on the trumpet. And then, he just walked his fingers and taught himself to slap and all that. It's just so neat.
Do you have series of pictures like that where you have these? Because a lot of these guys you still photograph, like Flea, really young Flea at this age, Flea now.
Absolutely, and I think that's for me and my archive. That's like one of the cool and important things is that I've photographed these people over the decades, right? And so because it's only shot on film, there's no recent photos because there's no digital photos in the book, right? So it ends in 2000,
in the book.
2008. But just to give you an example, so Michael Franti wrote the introduction for the book, right? I first photographed Michael Franti in 1987. Okay. He had a band called the Beatniks, and it was at a little club in Berkeley called the Berkeley Square. Their big hit song at the time is "They Don't Serve Burritos in the White House" for a DC boy. That was their song. They don't serve burritos in the White House.
And my favorite band.
It's like a John Prine title,
right? and then the Beatniks became Michael's next band, were the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, and they put out one record. I shot the back cover for that, and then Michael went out to form Spearhead. And then eventually became Michael Franti and Spearhead, right? It was called just Spearhead for a long time. Yeah. And he was on Capitol Records for a long time. And every time anything Michael did, the record company would hire me. I mean, my archive of Michael spans 35 years from 87 until today. Wow. I mean, Michael wrote the introduction. I mean, I'm going to go see Michael at Borderland in 3 weeks. He's playing and he still lives, he lives most of the time in Bali right now. But he's building this mega beautiful, incredible resort, boutique, hotel, healing experience.
Like it's retreat thing. Yeah.
Yeah. When I went over to his house to pick up all the signature pages. So the limited edition version of the book is signed by Michael, me, my daughter, and Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips, who wrote the foreword. I'll talk about Wayne for a second. But when I went over to Michael's house in San Francisco, when he signed all the signature pages for the limited edition book, he showed me a bunch of drone videos of his property in Bali, and they built like an amphitheater and this hotel. I mean, it is unbelievable. Yoga workshops, music experiences. It is unbelievable. So Michael is, he's been a long time San Francisco guy. Michael is incredibly smart, incredibly articulate, and one of the most, I think, healing human beings that plays music on stage. I mean, I've seen Michael get up on stage and just completely transform people's lives at his shows. He'll get kids up on stage to dance with him, or he'll get kids up on stage to sing with him. I remember at the Berkeley Greek Theater, we were doing a live web stream that I was actually directing, and he brought a 16-year-old girl up. She had an acoustic guitar, and I think she played, I forget what song it was. And that is a life-changing experience for that girl. That's something she will never forget. And every single show, and I've seen Michael Franti and Spearhead, I want to say, 30, 40, 50 times at this point. Every single time I see Michael, I walk away and I say, he just changed so many people's lives. Wow. And that's the beauty of rock and roll. Now, flipping it over to Wayne Coyne, because I mentioned him from the Flaming Lips, I first photographed Wayne in 1989. So I've got a 33-year relationship with Wayne. When they first came, and he was, they were this grunge band, and they were managed by a woman in San Francisco, and they came to San Francisco, and I did a publicity shoot of them. And then 6 months later, they were back in San Francisco with a new guitar player. So I did a new publicity shoot with them. And so my relationship with Wayne goes to 89, and it also goes through, and I've shot the Flaming Lips, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. My daughter wrote a short essay in the book called Father and Daughter. And the photo that we ran is a picture of her being, I think she's 8 years old, and she's dancing on stage with the Flaming Lips at their 2006. So she's 10. Born in 96, 2006 Yahoo Christmas party in San Francisco. They got hired to play for the Yahoo staff. 5,000 people in this big pavilion, and she's up on stage getting ready to do the Yoshimi karate chop with Wayne, and he's just looking over at her, and she's got a giant, stuffed animal head on her head, and that's the Flaming Lips. So Wayne and I go back, and we're the same exact age, and he's got 2 young kids now, and it's just been great to we look at each other and we're like, this has been going on with us for 30 years now. Like, that's just mind boggling that I've been photographing him do his thing, and we've been friends. And I called him up, and actually I texted him and I said, will you write the forward? He goes, I'll give it a shot. And he doesn't really use a computer. He does everything on his phone. So he would send me these text messages with this forward, and I would put them into Word documents, and we'd edit them and send it back to him. And, and it was pretty process.
And then he'd text it back to you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically the book. It's Wayne wrote the forward. Michael wrote the introduction. My daughter wrote a short essay. I wrote these long essays at the beginning of each decade. And then there are certain stories in the book. There's little asterisks that say, see notes, and you go to the back, and it's an extended caption about what it was, where I was, why I shot that. Yeah, I know I only sent you guys a PDF because I didn't have the books in yet, but now we got them in, so I'll send you guys copies for sure.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
Sweet.
I'm interested to hear about your process of writing those essays for the decades. That must have been a pretty interesting retrospective for yourself to look back on where was I at that decade? Because you mentioned you did personal as well as professional. That must have been a really interesting exercise.
It really was. I'm really quick. I want to see if I can find a PDF of the book. Here we go. Let me just see.
It's hard. It's wow, how do you fit in a whole decade in this little thing?
Right. So here, I'm gonna read the very, very beginning of the essay for the 1980s. And it starts out by saying, and there's a picture of Jerry Garcia on stage at midnight with balloons and confetti falling on him. And on the other page, it's a picture of Bill Graham landing in a butterfly net, dressed as a giant butterfly with steal your face wings. And this is how it starts. It says, at 12:01 a.m., January 1st, 1980, I was standing in front of the stage at the Oakland Auditorium Arena while colored balloons fell from the ceiling, confetti rained down on the Grateful Dead, and the Grateful Dead were singing Sugar Magnolia to a psychedelicized swirling crowd. I had just turned 18 years old exactly 1 month prior, and everything was exactly as it should be at that moment. I quickly became more and more immersed in my love for the music of the Grateful Dead and the history surrounding the cultural zeitgeist that had exploded out of that tiny neighborhood at the edge of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco called the Haight-Ashbury, beginning in 1964. Living in suburban New Jersey, bouncing between my mother's house in Clark and my father's just 5 minutes away in Westfield, I spent most of my time thinking about when I would next get to see the Grateful Dead or make my second sojourn to the Bay Area, which for me now was holy ground. This was the birthplace of the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, the Fillmore, the Avalon, Bill Graham, Chet Helms, and where Ken Kesey held some of his acid tests. All of this history consumed our thoughts and helped formulate how we would live our lives. So that's the beginning of that essay, and it just keeps going from there and talking about what happened with me in the 80s. And within a year of that, a year and a half of that, I had gotten arrested, picking up a couple thousand hits of LSD at an overnight facility in New Jersey, and life changed. And so, the next decade reflects on that. And so that's how I was writing. And then by the time I get to the early 2000s, I'm writing about the shift from shooting film to digital and what that means and how it affected our workflow. So it goes from a lot of very, very personal history, but also tied into all of my photography to become a professional photographer and all the things that we had to grapple with in making those transitions from analog to digital, how it worked, how it changed us as creative people, how it changed us as photographers, and how it changed the nature of how we dealt with artists and magazines and everything else that we were doing.
Some pretty big changes, man.
Yeah. Technology, the great disruptor.
Yeah.
We've
probably how it
changed you as
music.
Probably how it changed you as a businessman too, I imagine.
100%. I mean, we went from creating physical, tangible property to electronic files that were emailed. I mean, just from a business standpoint, since you brought it up, Mike, in the state of California, when we used to shoot on film and deliver our jobs to our clients with film, because it was tangible, it required us to charge sales tax. When we started transmitting files digitally and over the internet, there's nothing tangible, so there was no more sales tax. So it changed the nature of our business as business people. And, you've got to be a business person as well as a creative person to, navigate being a professional freelance, photographer. I'm a commercial photographer. I consider myself an artist, but I'm a commercial photographer. And it's where art and commerce meet. And you have to understand all the different aspects of how that works, both from a creative standpoint, now a technical standpoint. I mean, photography was always a technical art, right?
Yeah.
Even, shutter speed, back then you had to understand how shutter speed, aperture, film speed, and light all work together, but you didn't have a digital back to look at immediately to evaluate and make corrections or changes. You had to shoot it, develop your film, get it back, look at it, try and remember what the lighting condition was. And through osmosis, because we didn't have the internet to get on and look at YouTube and say, how come my pictures are overexposed or underexposed, or, what am I doing wrong? Like, we had to figure it out, read a book, take a class, try again, shoot more film, develop it again, see if it works, see what you're doing wrong. And nowadays, you take a picture, you look at it a split second later and you say, okay, too dark. If I do this, this, and this, I can make it lighter. If I do this, this, and this, I can make it lighter and more creative by changing the depth of field or the lighting or the color. There's all these things that you can do instantaneously. So there was a big learning curve. And of course, you guys are, in your 50s, right? Mike, are you in your 50s?
40s. But
40s.
I feel like I'm in my 90s. So yeah, it makes sense. We'll meet at 50s.
Oteil's in his 50s, but I mean, think about how, like and even you, Mike, I mean, we were not born with a cell phone as a pacifier in our mouth. So we had to, as adults, we had to learn this whole technology curve and reestablish ourselves. Oteil, I'm sure you recorded on analog tape in the early days of your career. And
editing stuff back then.
Yeah, moved to hard drives. Yeah.
Shit. But I don't, I wonder, as you describe the old way of doing things, I wonder, do we not learn better by failing more, doing it the old way?
I agree with you. I do.
I believe I heard
because you have to go through every,
Yeah, I believe I heard a thing about Jack White that like he won't use a sample. He'll build the instrument before using like a digital sample of something. Like he'd rather build it and make the sound authentically. And I think about that from the perspective of like now everyone's a photographer. I just got a new phone and it's like the selling point was the camera. Like, oh, you want this one because it's got a better camera. And I'm like, I don't care. Like I'll just subscribe to retro Blakesberg, or National Geographic or whatever. I don't need to, but it's like we all have the, it's
right.
So
we are all photographers. You're 100% correct. And
we're not all good photographers,
right? Well, that's the other
we're
problem.
Not all artists,
right? That's the other problem is that somebody posts a photo of Oteil on stage with his band or Dead & Co or whatever, and they're back at the soundboard, and Oteil is the size of the head of a pin, and it's blown out, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, that's incredible!" No, it's not incredible. It's a crappy photograph that should be deleted. But,
well, my wife taught me that because she actually has a degree in photography, so that's her mantra. Oh, everybody thinks they're a photographer.
Yeah, they're not.
She really appreciates the good ones, which you can do great ones on your phone.
You can.
But if you don't know how to frame it, if you don't know, like I'm constantly with people want to take pictures with me and like the lights facing the camera. I'm like, why don't we shift this way so you're not all blown out, just little things,
Oh yeah. We all do the same thing. Yeah, for sure. But technology is the great disruptor. And you're absolutely right that I think that having the background, the analog background, I think does make a big difference. I was at Sacred Rose. I was talking to all the folks that were on the media crew with me, and they're all 20 to 30 years younger than I am. And at the end, I was just saying, who's heard of Richard Avedon? And there was only one woman, this woman, Steph Port, an LA photographer.
Wow.
She's like, yeah, of course. Irving Penn. Yeah, she heard of it. And like the other 6 photographers had never heard of these people. And these are, it's sort of like, you listening to, Layla and other sort of love songs as inspiration for something that you're doing today, right? It's like going back and understanding the past to make you better in the present or the future. And there's so many people that don't have those points of reference. They never worked in a dark room. They never shot film.
Yeah.
They don't know about the great film photographers of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and so on and so forth. The Avedons, the Penns, the Friedlanders, Robert Frank, the street photographers, it goes on. And I think that
you see what they did without all of what we have now. It's like, it's stunning.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah. But on the other hand, they come to it with a completely new, fresh, today eye. And so they're creating things from that perspective that I look at and I say, well, I can't do that because I come from this perspective. So, it definitely goes both ways, and we all benefit and don't benefit by what we do know and what we don't know, and where we are and what we've seen and what we learned.
We are definitely that weird generation that grew up without the technology, the blow up of it. Look, my dad had a phone, and of course now phone's different, but we still had phones. This whole, we watched the internet become the thing that the internet that changed society completely. And it blows me away still to think I see children and I'm like, they never will have the experiences that we did. The waiting, just like you said, Jay.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, patience, forget it. But I know life is going to force them into patience too. This whole push button, I'm just as guilty of it, but I know life is going to deal you situations where you just flat out have to be patient. Because I something I worry about. The attention span is so short. The need for immediate,
Absolutely.
You know where I've noticed it a lot too with myself personally? I used to pride myself on being very good with directions. Getting on the road and going to shows, or getting out of a place and going all right, north is that way, whatever. Right. I knew directions and I memorized directions, and I was very reliable when it came to that. Now,
aware.
Yeah, now I'm doing a drive back and forth to a comedy club that I do twice a day, whatever, and I'm using Waze, or I'm using Google Maps, and I'm using, and I almost that part of my brain has gone on mute.
Well, Waze might be smart because it'll tell you, hey, there's an accident here. I mean, some part of it,
sure.
I think back, Jay, I'm sure you do, but we're on the road. And I was like, how did we do this back when we were on the road in 1987?
We had Rand McNally maps in our car, those big giant books.
The big trucker maps that were laminated. That's what we had.
Yeah, we went to AAA and made triptychs.
Yeah.
Triptychs, I remember those.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you'd go to AAA and you'd tell them where you were going, and they'd give you those paper maps. You'd unfold them. You can never fold them back up the same way. That's right. But you're right. Even memorizing, we used to know, hey, I'm going to go to New Haven. I got to get on 95 and I got to do this. And nowadays you're like, well, I think it's 95. Let me check my phone, and my phone will tell me.
Yeah.
But the other thing about the book, the Retro Blakesberg book, being only shot on film, is that, and even though it goes up to 2008, I don't think there's one photo in that book where you see a cell phone.
Yes.
Right. So, so even when you are looking at, definitely when you're looking at any photographs of deadheads that I have in this book, right? Deadheads dancing at a show in 87, 89, 91, whatever it is, 1980. And I say this when I do my public speaking gigs, right? So, I do and Oteil has seen me do this a couple of times. I do a Grateful Dead slideshow. That's about 90 minutes long. And I think we're going to take it out on the road in early November on the East Coast, starting in Connecticut, going down to Nashville for about 6 or 7 or 8 events. And when you're looking at these pictures of deadheads dancing, what's so unique about that time period and what's never going to be again is that there's no technology in those photos, right? First of all, nobody's taking pictures of their friends. Nobody is dancing because they want to be on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook the next day. Everybody is in that moment specifically to be in that moment. So it is truly an organic, technology-free experience. Yeah, there's rock and roll being played from the stage through electronics and through amps, but what we're experiencing are those sound waves and how we're absorbing them into our bodies and how those sound waves are making us move and groove and interact with each other and the band that's on stage. And to me, when I look at my photos, my analog photos, that is the most magical part of it all. Is that it is truly, truly a time in our lives that will never and can never happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certainly small shows that bands make you put your phone into a case and lock it up at the front desk. There's still some people that sneak it in or whatever.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think there will ever be a concert ever again where there is not something documented on a cell phone camera.
Right. Yeah. It kind of gives me hope that it lasted that long to 2008. I would have thought it would have been over by then.
Well, you have to remember. So in 2008,
Blackberries, basically.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we were texting already. But I don't think that we had cameras in our phones
yet.
Cameras
weren't as prevalent.
And if we did, they were like those super low res pixelated, like a Fisher Price toy camera, you know? And,
totally.
they were probably 300 to 500 kilobyte files. So, most people weren't everything they saw, they weren't photographing their food and the traffic and their baby and their brother and the girl and the boy and the this and the that. And, so there were less pictures being taken until the iPhone came out. And I'm not sure when that was, the first iPhone. I'm guessing maybe it was around 2008, 9, something like that, 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 8. But
I imagine probably.
We weren't a cell phone taking planet just yet.
Thank God.
Right.
So
it's got its pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that you bring that up because one of my if I'm writing or I'm working or whatever, one of my favorite background noises is old baseball games. I like to listen to baseball games, and ESPN Classic or sometimes they'll play games from way back, even early 2000s. And it's amazing to watch the crowd in between pitches. When there's no phones, people look at each other and people look at the sky or people take deep breaths. And it's just interesting. They take in watching the pitch, and then the catcher throws the ball back and the pitcher sets for the next pitch. And it's 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever.
Or more, yeah.
When people are just kind of looking at each other and talking or just taking a breath, taking whatever. That's a time now where we go let's see if anybody emailed. Let's see. I've been thinking about how if every time we checked a phone was lighting a cigarette, we'd all be smoking 60 packs a day,
Right.
But it's like you said, it's interesting to see a time period that's
it's no secret.
Option.
Yeah, it's no secret that the cell phone technology has changed the way we interact with other humans and interact with life in general. I mean, we all know that. I mean, even our kids, Oteil, your kids, I'm sure if you guys are traveling, they're on an iPad playing a game or watching a movie or.
And they're begging me for phones, 4 and 7.
Yeah, already. Right,
I mean,
Nigel.
It's cool because they want to connect with their friends.
Right.
On the, he's trying to do it through his Nintendo Switch. I see my friend on there, but I don't want to let him on the general internet because of,
of course, yeah.
But already at 4, we're like hardy har. No way.
I think my son is older. He's 28, and I feel like he got his first phone in 8th grade, and my daughter got her first phone in probably 5th or 6th grade.
It starts to get
earlier
and earlier.
Or maybe he was in 7th grade. Maybe he got it at middle school. Maybe he got it in 7th, and then she got her first phone, and not in 7th but in 5th. Something like that.
Well, some of these little kids around here have phones. I'm like, I don't care what she's got at that age. Like, you ain't getting it. Like,
right? Yeah.
This is a strange world for people who just don't want to be connected all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's a tough,
but
tough racket.
There's an off button.
Right.
I do it like, fasting, just phone fast. It's just like, I'm not, my schedule doesn't allow it most of the time, but sometimes you have to just take the time to not be on it so you can be human.
Yeah.
Let's change the subject for a second. Have you guys ever talked on your podcast to O'Teal about his stint as a Hollywood actor in the movie Being There? Have you ever seen, Mike, do you know about that clip? Have you watched it on YouTube?
Yeah, we've
done it a little bit
briefly about his acting days for sure.
Yeah, he had a speaking part in one of the greatest films ever. The Being There book, right? Jerzy Kaczynski wrote that, right?
Yes, Holocaust survivor.
What a great book that is, and O'Teal plays playing a tough, Washington D.C. thug.
It's funny you bring this up because I started to realize after last weekend that I've changed my view of nostalgia. Like, I used to think nostalgia was really hokey, but when you look back, like for us aging and stuff, with people that are still alive, a few of them died. Like, when you see people that are still alive that you've been through stuff with, but for 30 years ago, it makes you feel different now that you're older. Even though I was like crazy, I couldn't even see what was going on.
Right.
So like when I think about, being there and you look back on these things, it's just like, wow, how lucky we were.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and how lucky we are that we're still standing
to realize how lucky we were.
Yeah. And what you're talking about, that nostalgia really is now personal history, right? So yes. I like to always say that, we are the sum of our experiences. Right. And that for you, that was like your first experience in the limelight, so to speak. Right. You've had most of your adult life. You've been in the limelight, whether it was a small club with Bruce Hampton or a jazz club with your brother.
Back then at 14, like I had a TV show back then that won an Emmy where it was like a talk show for preteens to early teens. Yeah. And, and that's what drove me into music, because the television thing, like people treat you really, they get out of hand when you're on TV.
Right.
And it was weird. I have had that. And Kofi was in the limelight since he was really young, because he was just a child prodigy as a musician. He was in the newspaper and on TV. And, it's an interesting life.
Yeah. And so, you look at that nostalgia, which is really your personal history, which now has rolled into pop culture history because, it's interesting. So, Barry Oakley is the bass player in the Allman Brothers for 6 or 7 years. Lamar Williams, 5 or 6 or 7 years. Alan Woody, 5 or 6 or 7 years. O'Teal Burbridge, 25 years, 22 years?
17.
17.
But still more than all the others put together.
Twice the length of anybody else, right? But
I know.
you were an Allman Brother for 17 years. In our world, in our music world. So, growing up in the 1970s, our bands were the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers, right? And I'm not sure if, we were tapped into the Allman Brothers. Like, did that happen because of Watkins Glen, or did that happen because of the fact that, they were improvisational to a point, but different than the Grateful Dead were improvisational, and then out of the Allman Brothers and out of the South were all these other bands that, some we liked, some we didn't. Leonard Skinner, Charlie Daniels, Marshall Tucker, the Outlaws, sort of the Southern rock thing that sort of followed in the same vein as the Allman Brothers. And some of it we loved, some of it we didn't. I look back on some of it and I cringe. But, I mean, Green Grass and High Tides was a great song. And even watching them play that live, with, 2-3 lead guitars or 3 guitars, when they played it live, they improvised that a little bit, as did Leonard Skinner. In high school, I was not a big Leonard Skinner fan. I was more of a Marshall Tucker guy and a Charlie Daniels guy, but Charlie Daniels, became a kind of a crazed, redneck, a little bit of a, far right kind of a guy. But I mean, all those early Marshall Tucker records were beautiful. And
I just did a thing with Paul Riddle, the original drummer for Marshall Tucker, redoing some of that stuff with Marcus King and Charlie Starr.
George McCorkle and all those guys, and Toy and Tommy Caldwell. I mean, Toy Caldwell, the guitar player, he played with his thumb. He didn't use a pick, right? It was like super unique and interesting stuff that had flavors of jazz and improv in it, but still it was the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers that were the kings. And I mean, if you look back in history, like look at Wake of the Flood. Okay, we're getting close to the 50th anniversary of Wake of the Flood next year, 2023. Came out in 73.
That's right.
Right. So if you were to go back and look on the pop charts in 1973, the Billboard charts, and I did this when I interviewed Phil Lesh back in 2015 when at Terrapin Crustos they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Grateful Dead. Phil played a show from every year in the band's history, and before each show, I got up there and interviewed Phil about what was going on in the Grateful Dead history that year. And so we get to 73, and I would be like, okay, this is what's on the pop charts: Doris Day, Helen Reddy, Olivia Newton-John.
Helen Reddy, I remember.
I am woman, I am strong, right?
I am woman, hear me roar. I remember that shit, dude. I was like 9 years old then. But the Grateful Dead put out Wake of the Flood, and there's Weather Report suite on it, which is 13 minutes long. Eyes of the World.
Let me sing your blues away.
Right, and I'm like talking to Phil, Here Comes Sunshine. I'm talking to Phil, or really anybody, and you look at this and you're just thinking, what was this band thinking? Like they had, they had their own reference points for pop culture that was completely different than anybody else. And the Grateful Dead,
that was still allowed in that time.
Yes.
Back then, like artists were seeking to be different.
Yes.
Now they're like, somebody gets a hit. Okay, let's do 1,000 things. Just let's clone that. But back then you were like, you actually got rewarded if you found. Yeah. So there was room for Helen Reddy. And I mean, the Dead wasn't on the charts, but there was that was still a part of the mentality, like find your own sound.
What's up, everybody? This is Mike, and today's show is sponsored by Sunset Lake CBD, a Vermont hemp farm crafting affordable CBD products designed to help with stress and sleep without breaking the bank.
Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned hemp farm located just outside of one of our favorite places, Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. We had them on the podcast. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD.
And Sunset Lake CBD crafts products with hemp grown on their family farm and ships them directly to the customer, cutting out all the cost associated with getting on the shelves at stores. They have CBD products for every occasion and offer tinctures, salves, edibles, coffee, smokables, and even for that anxious dog of yours, they have pet products.
Ooh, I need to get some for my dog that's barking all the time. But I'll tell you this, I use these. The Sour Bears.
So good.
They are CBD gummies. I literally, no joke, I take these every night. They help me sleep. And it's almost bedtime.
Yep. And I still, as said it before, I'll say it again. You go to a long show, you come home, my 42-year-old ankles are not what they used to be. And I rub that salve all over them and put them up, enjoy a nice cocktail, and just let it ooze right into those sore bones. And you know what, folks? All you Comes a Time fans, if you check them out at sunsetlakecbd.com and use promo code TIME, T-I-M-E, you'll get 20% off all products. That's sunsetlakecbd.com. Use promo code TIME, 20% off all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown. Thank you.
Get you some.
Right.
You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the Grateful Dead were absolutely 100% original in that.
The kings of that, yeah. You know?
I mean, if you listen to that record now, like we listen to The Eyes of the World, and it's so incredibly pleasing and accessible. But like to get into the Grateful Dead, I mean, when I went and I saw the Jerry Garcia band before I saw the Grateful Dead in the summer of '77, and the only song that I knew was Sugar E. And you know, here's Jerry playing a bunch of Motown songs and other, you know, his own stuff that are, each one of those songs is 10 minutes long. You know, there's 5 or 6 songs in each Jerry Garcia band set when a Jerry band show happened, right? Because they're these extended jams. And I was 15 years old. I was trying to figure it out and trying to understand it. It wasn't so easy for a 15-year-old kid who, when I listened to the radio, I listened to like the Doobie Brothers and you know, Black Water and, you know, pop songs of you know, WNEW, classic rock, now classic rock, but then contemporary rock. You know, the stuff that we heard on the radio, David Bowie, you know, stuff that I guess was easier or more accessible in a pop, you know, music landscape than an Eyes of the World maybe would have been. But now you listen to Eyes of the World and you're like, there's nothing more accessible than Eyes of the World.
Like
anybody listening to it,
almost, right?
you know, listening to it and for a first time. And, you know, and those songs, you know, those lyrics, the way that they hit us, and they hit us hard, you know, as teenagers, you know, and I talk about this when I do my Grateful Dead slideshow, you know, it's those lyrics that made me want to go to San Francisco. It's those lyrics that made me want to read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. It's those lyrics that made me say, you know, like, think about the first time you ever listened to Tangled Up in Blue. Like, you know, and it's hard to think back, but, you know, think about that song for a second. Think about that story for a second. And like, and you're listening to it and you're 13 or 14 or 15 or 16 years old or whatever you are. And you've got your headphones on and you're in your bedroom and you're playing it on vinyl and the black lights are on and the posters are glowing. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, why am I in New Jersey? But you're 15 and you don't know how to get out of New Jersey. Right. Right. Yes. And then somebody says, listen to this Grateful Dead record. In my case, it's this guy named Lozzie. He'd come over, listen to this Grateful Dead record. And by the way, you know, I think it's going to snow next Tuesday and we're going to get school canceled. So I'm getting some blotter LSD and we're going to listen to this fucking record all day long on a snow day. And we're going to look at that album cover and watch the clouds melt with the skull. And I'm talking about Wake of the Flood because my first snow day and my first acid trip and Wake of the Flood all go together. Right.
Wow,
and those,
really?
Yes.
Whoa,
yeah.
what amazing. Yeah, what a confluence.
On a snow day, too.
On a snow day.
Yeah, you know,
snow
you know,
on acid is amazing.
Right. Your mother, you know, my mother would go to work and 6 people come over your house and you all drop acid and you don't know what to do or what to expect. And you know, my daughter took LSD for the first time at Fare Thee Well. Right. And and so she, you know, I'm like, Ricky, why do you want to take acid when there's 70,000 people in the stadium? And she goes, well, I want to take acid because both my mother and my father are going to be there. And if anything goes wrong, I can find you guys. You know,
I thought she was going to go, well, you're going to be on acid. So I'm going to be on acid.
My brother and father are going to be on acid.
You guys are going
OTL, I didn't start dosing again at shows until I met you and microdosed with you a couple times.
That's awesome because I took a really long time. People always ask me, you're like, man, what was it like dosing with the Colonel? I was like, I never did that. I stopped like around, I think 18, 19. I want to say 18. Like I did a hardcore, like 17, 18, like hardcore. And then I just stopped. And it did it once with the Colonel in Avon, Colorado. This must have been like 19. We played volleyballs, me, Jimmy, and Matt, and early 90s, 92, 91. And then never again, right? Maybe at the Beacon one time with Derek and the guys, like micro. And I really didn't start again till Dead and Company.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
me
all
too.
micro except for this one time.
Right.
And then,
well, I remember one time at Shoreline, you and me did some micros together.
Yeah.
And then I remember at Set Break, you're like, I think I need to do more.
and that's what I'm so glad that you say that so people can know, because it gets Teal, like, it's on YouTube or whatever. But literally, like, I do so little. I'm pretty sure I need to do that much again just to make sure, like we're dialing up real minutely,
right. It's therapy, man. It's, I've already seen God, and it's not a guy with a long beard and some tablets.
We've been there already.
Like I've already done, so same with me. Like I stopped taking acid in the late 80s and didn't do it for, I don't know, almost 20 years. And then I took some acid at a Mother Hips concert in San Francisco. And then about a month later, 2 months later, I took 5 hits of acid, and I went big, and it was fucking,
you did.
And it was amazing. And I've never done that again. Okay. because it took me, 3 days to recuperate.
Absolutely.
Right. And any psychedelic experiences I've had since then have basically been microdoses or mushrooms and whatnot. And, and it's spread out and far between, but
we can get there literally without it. Like not the 5 hits. Well, maybe if you starved yourself for long enough, but like I got there seeing Earth, Wind and Fire. Like it just, when your spirit is so filled and then it starts overflowing out your eyeballs, nose and mouth. And then after they were done, I was just like, this is as good as anything.
Right. Yeah.
Anything.
Well, that's how we feel about music in general. I mean, when we leave a Dedeco show and we see you or whatever, like that's why we don't always
get it.
Right. We don't always need to dose. We don't always need to go down that road. But every once in a while, it's nice to blow out the cobwebs and but I will tell you that the psychedelic experience is alive and well and thriving everywhere.
Yeah,
and it's thriving. Sure. It's thriving all over America. What's the tribute band that Pete plays in South Florida?
Crazy Fingers.
Crazy Fingers, right? There's a Crazy Fingers and a Splintered Sunlight and a Mr. Blotto and a this band and that band.
Mr. Blotto.
Yeah, like they're in Chicago. In every town, in every city, and people are going out and they're dosing or microdosing.
Even grandmothers, and like it's in suburban. People are curious. Yeah. It's in mental health now, and I'm glad. The reason I do it now is because it's almost like it's just a little to join the group. It's a little group sacrament.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'll do just like John will say, it's almost like a placebo. Like, do I really feel it? I think I feel, but I know it's in the audience, and I just want to plug in with everybody. And it's like, okay, now we're all like, I don't need to.
Right.
But I don't know. It's like this. It's a celebration of this moment. If we get it, could be a nuclear holocaust, asteroid, like who knows what.
Right.
We're going to celebrate right now. Boom. Just a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing too. It can't be a coincidence that the world's turning to shit and psychedelics are coming up because they're needed. It balances.
Baby.
Yeah, it's like you need
I've seen that as hate rises and gains momentum, like the love thing comes right up to meet it, and it's mind blowing to watch.
Yeah.
If you can zoom out enough, you could see it happening. I'm like,
and
okay.
I think microdosing also, like back in the old day, everybody would be like, well, if everybody on the planet took acid, we'd all be a better,
like
planet.
Leary wanted to,
Right. Yeah. But the problem is that there's so much harshness, we'll call it. I don't want to say hate, but there's so much harshness on the planet and there's so many people that are not stable that, but I think that even the most unstable person could possibly handle, like, I'm talking about the most minute microdose, just enough to sparkle a little bit. And that's what like microdose therapy is all about. Like I have an old assistant of mine, a guy that worked for me for a number of years. That's what he does. He does psychedelic therapy. I mean, he's trained, he's legal, he's licensed. And I went to lunch with him. He's like, no, when you do microdosing for therapy, you do not feel anything. Like you're doing, you're doing a tenth of a hit or less, right? You're not supposed to feel anything. You're not supposed to see anything. It is therapeutic, and I understand that. And there's been obviously numerous books written about it in the last 8 to 10 years, and it's changed. But it was the CIA that let the genie out of the bottle, of course.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
And Kesey,
It's when this comes up, this rises up to meet it. It's like, you shouldn't have given it to Kesey.
That's it.
And I love all that pop culture history. I love all of that. There's a great museum in San Francisco. It's the Museum of Blotter Acid Art, and the guy who runs it, he just has the greatest stories ever.
Is that
Mark McLeod?
Mark, I went to his house. I went
Perfect
there.
name.
Oh yeah.
The lady that makes my shirts, my handmade shirts, Lisa, she knows those guys, and you see the press that chopped up. That made all the little squares.
The perforating machine. Yeah.
And
every time I go over there, I bring over like Grateful Dead postcards and I put them through the perf machine. So I have
sweet,
all like business cards and little Jerry like perforated things. I do that all the time. But yeah,
I was there and I was telling him about the acid that I was doing as 18, 19, 17, 18, 19 in there, and it was called King Tut. My wrestling name, my nickname from the Colonel is Oteil from Egypt. And this was way before then. And it had this little picture of the head of a sarcophagus. And he goes, I got the painting that was made from. And he goes and digs it out. And I'm thinking, wow, if I could tell my friends. And he sent me a copy of it and signed it.
Amazing.
I have it back here somewhere. I was just like, holy crap, because those were real times of super epiphany. That's when we weren't raised religious, but that's when I saw God and had figured out all the philosophical stuff that my life would be based on. And then to come full circle and have him send me this, I was just like, whoa, dude.
Was that the one that you were taking when it was just picture the light? When your mom, you came home in high school?
I don't know if that was that exact
that story
one.
Is just wow.
But that was that time that we took. It was a time period of probably a few weeks where we did that King Tut. That's what we called it,
right?
And that's when it all happened, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That museum is the best, man. It's this dude's house.
Yeah.
You know what I love about the whole microdosing therapeutically thing is when you're taking drugs, right? It's like, am I feeling it? Am I feeling it? Am I feeling it? The thing about the microdosing in the therapeutic sense is it's not what you feel, it's what you don't feel. It's the absence of all the anxiety, and it's the absence of all the bullshit, and the absence of the critic.
Well, that's the purpose of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful part about it is that I saw a thing that there's now, I think they started their first trials on I guess it'll be a medication called Cybin, Cybin, and it's a daily pill to treat major depressive disorder, with psilocybin being the major ingredient in it. So it's starting to even make its way into that fold, which is
pharmaceutical.
Yeah, cool.
Phenomenal.
Well, speaking of museums, I have my first solo museum exhibition happening coming up October 14th. It opens. It's at a museum in New Jersey called the Morris Museum, and it's in Morristown, New Jersey. And the Morris Museum is actually a Smithsonian affiliate museum. Cool. And I've got an exhibit called Retro Blakesberg, captured on film, 1978-2008. And I've got 126 prints, I believe, over 4 galleries. So there's a gallery that's just live concert photos. There's a gallery that's just portrait photography. There's a gallery that's just Grateful Dead. And there's a 4th gallery that's like early work and high school, college, figuring out, how to take pictures. But when I was in high school, the first month of my senior year of high school, so that'd be September of 78, I photographed back-to-back 2 nights in a row, Bob Dylan and Neil Young at Madison Square Garden. Pete Townsend, The Who at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey in September of 79. Clapton. I photographed Lowell George 2 nights before he died.
Oh, wow.
So this is all stuff that I shot when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And so that's sort of in the one gallery, like the early work. And, like any museum exhibit, there's big boards of text and ephemera. and small boards of text and pivotal moments and things like that. So that opens October 14th at the Morris Museum, and it goes till February 5th, 2023.
Beautiful.
And on the
all right, so I'll definitely get to see it.
Yeah. If you're up, it's like 30 minutes from Manhattan.
Oh,
yeah, easy to get to. And on October 16th, which is a Sunday, during the afternoon, we're going to do like an open house. I'm going to do a little slideshow and a meet and greet and do a walking tour of the gallery with whoever wants to show up. So that's sort of like it opens to the public on the 14th, but on that Sunday, the 16th, I'll be there to hang out and schmooze and hang with my friends. The way that I got the exhibit was my best friend from kindergarten, a guy named Mark Gershman. His mother was a volunteer at the museum. And Mark Gershman and I were best friends from kindergarten to 5th grade till 1971 when I moved to a different town. And then we didn't see each other for 30 years.
Wow.
His first Dead show was my first Dead show, English Town.
Kidding.
So we were on the same path. He walked into a bookstore in 2002. So 31 years later, he walked into a bookstore in Boulder, Colorado and said, "Hey, will you sign my new Grateful Dead book?" It was my first book, right? I've done 16. My new book, Retro Blakesberg, is my 16th coffee table book. He said, "Will you sign this to Mark Gershman?" I look up at him and I'm like, oh my God. And he lived in Boulder and listens to all the same music and did all the same stuff that I did. Even though we didn't see each other from when we were 10 years old, we definitely drank from the same water fountain, right?
You drank the Kool-Aid.
And we're still friends to this day. And his mother is so classic. His mother says to the museum curator, you know, she worked in the archival department as a volunteer. She's retired, you know, in her 70s or 80s at this point. And she says, you know, my friend Mark's best friend from kindergarten is a really famous rock photographer. You should see about having an exhibit with them. And so, of course, you know, they called me up and I got on a phone with them and they said, okay, you know, we'll consider this. Put on your calendar to call us in a year. And so I called them a year later, which was this last January in the middle of COVID. Awesome. And they said, yeah, we want to do this.
Awesome.
And so
I love it. So Thanks, Mrs. Gershman.
Yeah, I know, right? Jackie Gershman, right? And so thanks to Jackie and Mark Gershman. Yeah. And so the exhibit is being printed right now and it's going to hang in about 3 weeks. And it's going to open October 14th. So we have a super, super cool poster that we made for it. I'll send it to you guys. You can post it on the link or whatever.
We will.
Thank you.
And it's open to the public. So please come out and check out my solo museum exhibition. Rock and roll is legit in a Smithsonian affiliate museum in New Jersey. And the other thing that's great is that it's like, you know, 20, 30 minutes away from where I grew up. Right. So, you know, in high school, like we were juvenile delinquents. So, you know, like we left high school with everybody thinking that we were like the class stoners and losers and we followed the Grateful Dead. So like, remember when Nixon left the White House in disgrace and got on the helicopter and Dan Rather sitting there, the Annie Leibovitz photos, and he gives the piece on, you know, Nixon leaves office a national disgrace and dies a national hero, right? So I left high school, you know, the high school stoner disgrace and come back the national hero with the museum exhibit in New Jersey. So,
perfect.
So perfect.
Misfit power, like Mickey said.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Staying power.
We are misfits for misfits. I actually think that was Weir who said that, not Mickey. I think that was a Weir quote. We are misfits. We are misfits playing for misfits. Something like that. Yeah. But yes, misfit power. That is definitely us, and we continue to be, because look at us. I go to Dead & Co. and I see all the misfits, you know, but I do have to say that we are truly, truly, truly lucky that we discovered this music, discovered this experience, and you know, for me, it's been my entire life since a teenager. I mean, I've been involved in this experience, this experiment in public assemblage through rock and roll now for, you know, 45 years. Right. And, you know, my first experiences with the Grateful Dead were in 1977. That's when I started listening to records by the Grateful Dead. That's when I saw Jerry Garcia in 1977. That's when I saw the Grateful Dead for the first time in September of 77. Actually, wait. Oh, tomorrow's
time.
Wait, tomorrow's 9/1. So these next 3 days, these are all big anniversaries. So tomorrow, 9/1, 2022, on 9/1/79, I saw the Grateful Dead in Rochester, New York at Holliday Stadium. it was the second of 4 big Labor Day weekend concerts the Dead did on the East Coast. The next day, 9/2/2022, was the first Grateful Dead concert that I ever photographed, which would be 9/2/78, Giant Stadium. 9/3, September 3rd, 77, was Englishtown, my first Dead show. 9/6, 1980 was Lewiston, Maine. Technically the weekend after Labor Day, I believe, but still it was the final show of the East Coast Summer Tour. Legendary show. Some of my most well-known photos of Deadheads dancing are from that show, 9/6/80, and some of them are in the new book, Retro Blakesberg. And that show is a bootleg tape, CD, archive, download, whatever. I asked David Lemieux a few years ago, why isn't Lewiston, Maine, 1980 a Dick's Picks or a Dave's Picks? And he said, we do not have a soundboard tape of that show. There are only audience tapes. But it's one of those legendary shows that everybody raves about. So every year when I post photos from that show on 9/6, which I'll probably do next week, everybody will start to comment about how incredible that show is. You can go and download it or listen to it on the archive.org. And it's really, really great. So there were 4 big shows Labor Day weekend, essentially 9/1, 9/2, 9/3, 9/6, 77, 78, 79, 80. And I went to all 4 of those. And so this is like a big anniversary for me. The 9/1/79 show tomorrow, I shot that up in Rochester and I submitted those photos to a free weekly newspaper in New Jersey called the Aquarian Weekly. And they ran 2 of my photos, and I got paid $7.50 for each photo for a total of $15. And that was the first time I was published and paid money for my photography.
Professional photographer.
I was 17 years old. I mean, listen,
that's awesome.
Dead tickets were only $10. So like you got,
so that was a win.
That $15 was a win because I went and saw the Dead at Madison Square Garden 5 days later, right?
It's a couple 6-packs,
yeah.
Do you have people like that are in those photos like that young contacting you going, hey, that was me? I mean, they got to freak out when they see themselves in these books.
I have people that are in those photos that are still my friends to this day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's
great. Next week, I'm going to my pal Dan Skinner's 65th birthday. We met on August 12th, 1979 at Red Rocks at a Grateful Dead concert.
Wow.
So,
nice.
He held the hoop at my wedding. We've been roommates. We've lived together. That's how, Dan has never not been in my life, right? But there are people that disappeared for a number of years, and what brought us all back together was Facebook. In 2008, I self-published a book called Traveling on a High Frequency, and that book is named after people like you, OTL, musicians who travel on a high frequency. And it is like all you musicians. That's what I felt about you guys. You travel on this this different frequency. Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Bob Weir, Jerry Garcia, Teal Burbridge. The list goes on, right? And so no, seriously.
Put me in there with Dylan.
Fuck yeah! You were in the Allman Brothers for 17 years, motherfucker.
It's just a little
right. I get it. But I'm just saying,
Bob Dylan's face was priceless.
Right. All of you guys, and so I got on this new thing. It was new to us. It had been around for a few years already, but I got on this new thing called Facebook because I thought, maybe I could reach people to market my new book. I think by the time the book came out, I had 600 or 700 friends on Facebook. Right now, I've got 90,000. Right, and so I started posting some of these old shots of Deadheads from the late 80s and early 80s on Facebook in 2009, 2010. And this Deadhead friend of mine named Tommy Rosen, he wrote an article in the Huffington Post about how these photos were bringing all of these people who hadn't seen each other or talked to each other since Jerry died in 95 back together, right? And at that point, it was only 12, 15 years later, right? But a lot of people, they went off, they got jobs, God forbid, right? They had families, they got
whole trajectory changed,
right? Yeah. Everything changed when Jerry died because even though Fish was happening and then eventually Widespread and String Cheese, because those bands have been around now for 30 years, we were already a member of one cult. right? And it was hard for us to be like, okay, I'm gonna quit this
Jump
cult
ship.
because Jerry died and join another cult, right? Like we didn't want to. Like it was hard for us to understand that. And listen, I love Fish to pieces. I love their music. I go see them whenever I can. And all of those bands, Jimmy Herring. I mean, come on, you're best friends with Jimmy. Jimmy's the greatest human being on the planet, right? And not to mention probably one of the greatest guitar players on the planet. And so all of that music turns us on. But at the time, in 1995, when Jerry died, like, you know, I had my first kid in 94, my second in 96. And you know, and the museum exhibit I was talking about, my daughter helped curate that whole museum exhibit as well. Cool. It was me, her, and the assistant curator at the museum. But Ricky was the main influence because she curated the book. So
that's gotta make you so proud, man.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
I mean, Ricky is just crushing it, you know?
That's awesome.
You know, it all comes full circle, but it's been an incredible journey. And I have to say that I feel incredibly fortunate that I was born with that psychedelic strand of DNA. And this is the life that I chose, and then I worked hard to become part of, because you don't get to photograph the people that I have gotten to photograph by being a slacker, right? Like, you know, for me, it's hard fucking work. You know, I was, you know, and also part of it for me is I was scared. Like I didn't want to go back to jail, right? And I didn't want to be some guy selling insurance. Not that there's anything wrong with selling insurance.
I didn't want to go back to a straight job.
Yeah, I didn't want to
had one straight job for like a month or something, you know?
Right, that shit's fucked up, man. Yeah.
It is, bro. I was like, no.
Yeah. I have way too much ADD for a straight job, you know? And so, you know, they didn't know how to diagnose that shit when we were young. But so, you know,
we're lucky, man.
For me, I just worked. I took every single shitty $200 job that I could get because it paid my rent.
$250.
Yeah.
That's what we were trying to, like, how do I get rid of these $50 gigs? I'm moving equipment.
Right. Exactly. Because, you know, I didn't want to have to go get a job. I wanted to be available so that if Rolling Stone magazine called me, I could be like, yeah, I can go do that. And you know what?
Go.
That's what happened. That's what happened. My anniversary, my 35th anniversary is coming up, 11/11/87. I did my first paid assignment for Rolling Stone magazine. Wow. They hired me to go shoot a free U2 concert in downtown San Francisco when they were filming Rattle and Hum. And I went on to do 300 assignments for the magazine over the next 35 years. But you know, so I was living hand to mouth, you know, literally making $100 here, $200 here.
Yeah, you paid your dues.
Scraping by and building a portfolio and building a body of work. And now I'm fortunate that I was able to, you know, keep all of that stuff and not lose any of it, even the stuff going back to high school. And
for real.
You know, I look at my body of work and I'm incredibly proud of it. We should all be proud of the work that we do. But also I look at it as an important document of a time that is, you know, a you know, forgotten space, a time of forgotten space, right? Because it's gone. We're past it, and it ain't coming back. It's evolving. The wheel is turning. You can't slow it down. And I want to be there when that wheel turns to the next spin. And I want to be in Mexico with you in January and Dead & Co. Because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, my Grateful Dead archive is not complete until Bob, Phil, Mickey, and Phil all stop playing music. You know, and I'm not saying when they're dead. I'm just saying when they officially retire and stop playing music, that's when my Grateful Dead archive ends. It didn't end with Jerry Garcia. You know, that was a chapter. I mean, look at this. We're at year 27 of Jerry being gone? Is that right? Or is it 95 to now? Is that 20?
Wow.
Yeah, 27 years. Okay. So all of these guys, Bob, Phil, Mickey, Billy, all of them are this close away from a 30-year career post Jerry.
Okay. I mean, how many bands stay together 30 years?
Right.
Man?
And the Grateful Dead was 30 years.
30 years
all of them, I mean, the music that Billy has been making with his band, what Phil does, what Mickey has been doing,
Wolf
Planet
Bros,
Drum, you know, Wolf Bros,
They're
Rat
cranking
Dog,
it out.
Dead & Co. All of this stuff is so important to our history as Deadheads.
Yeah.
Right. And you're part of it. Like, you know, you're the only guy. You are the only guy that has been in the Allman Brothers and the Dead, O'Teal. You span both of those worlds now.
There's actually two others.
Oh, Jimmy Herring.
And Warren Haynes.
Right. Okay.
It's like just the three of us.
Right.
Which
You're
is
right.
so weird because those are my old time bros. Like, it's going to be coming up on 40 years, from the South.
Yeah.
From the South. It's like what you were saying about the Allman Brothers and the Dead. Isn't it weird that coming out of the South and the Allman Brothers were the only three that played in both bands?
Right.
It's something.
It's weird. Yeah. I don't know why I didn't think about Jimmy and Warren there in that moment, but yes, of course you're right. I mean, 100%.
Yeah. And we actually all played together. It was a concert for Obama, Hershey Park, the Dead, and the Allman Brothers. They hadn't played together since. For sure. And that was crazy. If I could, looking back on that now, I couldn't have really.
Yeah, all that Obama
understood.
stuff came from Brian Lesh, Phil's son. He was the one who was he was volunteering for Obama. I think he was in college still at Princeton. And Pennsylvania was a big battleground state, and so they decided to do it at State College. And there's a little video of Obama floating around out there where he's on Air Force One, I believe, or whatever,
that's right.
Where he gives a shout out to Brian Lesh and the Dead and the Almonds for stepping up and helping him out. There's like that video exists. It's amazing.
That night was something. It's like I just remember it. It was a historic night. I was young then, and I wasn't aware of like, oh, this is really big. Like, that's one of the good things about getting older, right, Jay? You're like, it. You're like, oh shit, I'm glad Jay's photographing this because,
those pictures
it's like
are still going to be there.
Tour, dude. That last Dead and Company tour was like that. I was like, something is happening.
Yeah, you said that quite a bit during this tour. Yeah.
And people were so worried it was going to be the last. Even my wife, I was like, you can't play shows that good.
Right.
And then it just stopped.
Yeah.
I'm just sorry.
I had some really great email exchanges with John Mayer about how he was feeling. And I mean, he was just saying some really great stuff about his place in the script and where he was and how happy he was. And it was very, very cool. I love John. I mean, he wrote the foreword for my Jerry Garcia book. Really interesting. That book came out 3 years ago. So you can find all my books on my website, blakesberg.com or rockoutbooks.com.
We got to get that out there.
Yeah, either way. But John I asked John to wrote the foreword, and you know how articulate John is. John is a smart man. Like
his mom was an English teacher,
and his dad. They were both like academics.
Super.
Like John is so smart, and he wrote the foreword, which is brilliant. And about 6 weeks ago, somebody posted the foreword on social media, and it went viral again 3 years later.
Nice.
And it blew up the internet because
Good
people
timing
were like,
for my new book.
Yeah, it was actually great. I mean, I all of a sudden there was a spike in sales on the Jerry Garcia book. And I'm like, how did you people not know this book has been out for 3 years? And John wrote this 3 years ago. But, John's thoughts and feelings and energy with Dead & Co is unreal. And I agree. I just think this band is just really on fire. And, I think
it's nice when it all comes together. And this last tour, it just all came together and it wouldn't stop. And that's a gift, man. We got to celebrate when that happens. And I'm so glad you were there.
Yeah.
Clicking, because we don't know when our last show is going to be. We know this from all the people that have passed.
Right.
I'm sure you think, wow, I never realized that was the last time I was ever going to photograph him.
And age has nothing to do with it. In this
No, not at all.
No.
100%. I mean, look at Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, in his 50s. And, when I photographed Garcia at Shoreline in June of 95, like, I didn't know that was going to be the last time I would see Jerry Garcia. Just nobody knows. David Bowie, Taylor Hawkins. Yeah, I mean the list goes on and on.
I mean, how much older am I than Jerry? I think about that a lot.
Right,
like I just turned 58.
Yeah,
it's like,
you're 5 years older than when he died, and you look 20, and you look 25 years younger.
Well, a lot of it's because when you've been out on the road with the Allman Brothers since you're 32. About 10 years in, I looked at it, I was like, that's going to be you if you don't change from what you're doing. Like, I could already see it.
Right.
So I literally, I turned the aircraft carrier because it's like, man, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, you see Bob out there. Bob ain't messing around, man.
No.
He's like,
Yeah.
I ain't going out like that, man. You know.
Yeah.
So.
No, and Bob is serious about his workouts. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I was up at his house a few months ago. I was filming him for a documentary project I'm working on, and he has all of his gear set up in the driveway. And he showed me all of his routines. He said, "Videotape these, Jay. Videotape them so you can do them. You know, they're great for your back. You know." And I was like, "Yeah."
He had me do one that's like, because it was for my back. Oh man, it was a challenge. He said, "Yeah, it's going to take you a minute." I was like, "Look at this old motherfucker!"
Well, remember there was video.
Shame.
Yeah, you know? there was video of him at the gorge with this hammer, and he was just like slamming down.
That's what he does. He swings that hammer. It's like, he was telling me about the hammers and told me where to get it, and this one place. I don't remember where it is now. I got to probably but that stuff feels really good because it stretches all of your muscles. And I carry so much gear, which is why I was asking about it. I'm like, what can I do to stretch? Because I carry all this gear, and that's when he showed me a couple of his moves there on his device.
60 plus years, right, or however many now at this point of carrying that strap weight. Like that's got to do such nerve and muscle damage and all that. I mean,
my back last year, right, it just caught up with eventually.
A year of doing yoga, and look at me, you're dancing around like a nut this year.
I know. Actually, it's true. There was a whole year. There was a whole year in there, OTL, where you didn't move the way you were moving back a couple years ago. And I have the photos to prove
how much pain you're in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me sitting down like,
Yeah. And you got DDP yoga and fixed you right up.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden I was like, okay, this has got to stop. You know, I went and got the MRI, but all that to say, Jay, thank you for choosing life. Thank you for being in for the long haul. You know, you have to be intentional about getting old in this business.
Yeah.
Like there's or have great doctors like Keith Richards the whole time. But like the rest of us have to be intentional about it. And it does make me feel nostalgic in that best way to reminisce with you about old time, like the whole journey.
Yeah. It's been a good
we're
ride.
Lucky to be here.
Yeah. And it's not over yet. The ride's not over yet. We still got a lot left in us. I know you got a lot of music left in you, and I just love what you're doing with your bands. I love how solid the bands are you're putting together and the guys you're playing with. Of course it seemed like it was going in a really solid direction with Neil Casale, and of course the anniversary of his passing was just a few days ago. I never realized until this year that your birthday and his passing were a day apart from each other.
Yeah, I got the text the day after my birth because that was his last show. It's with me.
Yeah, I know. I was there. I photographed it, and I had dinner with Neil that night. And so, listen,
you see the picture? I think you took it. The picture of Nigel and him and Nigel on the couch.
No, I didn't
in the
take that
dressing room.
I was in the dressing room with you guys, but I don't think I have one with Nigel in it.
He's just he's got this big smile, and we were talking about plans for the next year.
Right.
And Nigel was just all amped up on birthday cake. He didn't eat anything but sweets.
Right.
And we're just laughing. And the next day, I saw that picture. I was like, how could I have possibly? There's no way we could have known.
Right.
There's no way we could have.
But
he was so grateful to play with Bob and stuff. And
yeah, that was a great set. Dwayne Bett sat in, and Dwayne was grateful to meet Neil that day. Let's just all take a minute to just, keep an eye on all our friends and look for signs and stay healthy and help people that you see
reach out.
that are struggling, and anybody who is struggling, make sure you reach out. There's resources, there's Backline, there's your friends. Just, don't be afraid to reach out because those of us who are still left standing after you decide to check out, we hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And, we still hurt because of Neil and Jeff Austin and other people that have done that on their own.
So many.
And we don't like that. We don't want that. We don't want to see that. We want to help you. And so anybody,
you gotta be intentional about reach because sometimes you don't know if someone's struggling. I didn't know Neil was struggling, but me, I'm such a let's hug, do we need to talk? You know what I mean? Like, I'm here for just like, be there, be intentional about letting people know, like, you can reach out to me. Like, I'm one of those people you can reach out to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Cause when you don't know they're struggling, hopefully you planted enough seeds in there.
Right.
That they, you know, it may just be that one little thing and they do
just
it,
assume everyone's struggling and be kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're ever since Kofi passed away, you know, he was 57. And so I think every time something really cool happens, like Kavi just learned to swim a couple days ago, like she just started. Yeah, we've been waiting for that moment. And I'm just like, I'm glad I lived long enough to see this moment. I'm glad I lived long enough to see this moment. I'm glad I didn't die. And I feel that way at 110, I'm sure. Be like, wow, so that happened.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. Glad I saw that. You know, so.
Yeah, I want to hit
Thank you for documenting those moments.
Yeah,
too.
man, really. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we got
so excited for your tour.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. Again, I'll just
come
remind
back
everybody,
soon, please.
Yeah, you know, my museum exhibit, the Morris Museum, opens October 14th. My new book, Retro Blakesberg, you can get it on Amazon and bookstores. But also, if you want to get a signed copy directly from me, just go to blakesberg.com or rockoutbooks.com. Those are my websites. And Oteil, give my love to Jess and Kavi and Nigel, and hugs to everybody. And next time I'm down your way, I'll come over and visit again.
I know you're going to Nashville's the furthest south you're going.
Yeah,
South Florida. Come on.
But my dad lives in Boca, so he's close by to you guys in South Florida. So when I
get to see you. Yeah,
when I see my family, I'll come over and say hi. And Mike, look forward to seeing you sometime soon. And love you guys, and thank you so much. You know what? Real quick, I want to say I've always loved the name "Comes a Time for Your Podcast" because my very first book that I ever published is called "Between the Dark and Light," which is a lyric from "Comes a Time." Yeah. So it has special place in my heart because I love that. I love that song. And I know you sing it, Oteil. You know, it was always a special. I mean, you know, it's a Jerry Garcia band song. It's on Reflections, but it's a Grateful Dead song because that's where we all know it from. And it was always a beautiful, rare ballad in that slot there at the end of the show. And when we got a Comes a Time, we really cherished that. We really cherished the China Dolls and To Lay Me Downs. And I know those are all the songs you get to sing, which is just fabulous. So we love that, and we love when they get broken out when you're up on stage. So
thank you, man.
We love you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Peace out, everybody.
All right, man. Bless you.